What if Pharaoh let Israel go on the first plague? What if Pharaoh had broken earlier, much earlier? Imagine a world where the first plague was enough to shatter Egypt's pride, and the Exodus began before the river ever turned red again. A single surrender, shifting the fate of nations. Stay with me. Because if Pharaoh lets Israel go at the very first sign of judgment, the entire chain of miracles, wars, and revelations changes. And by the end you'll wonder, would faith grow stronger? Or would the world lose the fire that shaped it? When we look back at the saga of the Exodus, we usually picture a sequence of escalating wonders, each one striking harder than the last. Yet before darkness fell over the land, before storms shattered the sky and death swept through Egypt, there was a smaller moment. Quiet, tense, easily overlooked when everything could have taken a different path. The first plague, the Nile turning to blood, appeared not as destruction, but as a warning. In that brief window, Pharaoh still had a choice. He could have stepped back, swallowed his pride, and spared his nation from catastrophe. Imagine this instant as a doorway left slightly open, a fragile hinge where the fate of empires balanced on a single decision. If he had relented then, at the very first ripple of the supernatural, the story we know might never have grown into the epic that shaped countless generations. This is where our journey begins, standing at the crossroads of a history that could have unfolded in an entirely different way. And as we step into this timeline, we feel the weight of that decision pressing against edges of possibility, reminding us that even the smallest surrender can redirect the course of destiny. Before the first plague struck, Egypt lived under a steady rhythm shaped by power, ritual, and the dependable rise of the Nile. Its cities buzzed with merchants, scribes, and priests, while the palace projected the authority of a pharaoh believed to stand between mortals and the divine. In this vast landscape of order and pride, Israel endured in the shadows, bound to exhausting labor yet guarding an ancient promise of freedom. The contrast was stark, the splendor of temples and ceremonies on one side, the quiet endurance of a people who waited for deliverance on the other. Everything appeared fixed, as if history itself had settled into certainty. But beneath the calm surface, unseen tensions gathered, preparing the world for a rupture that had not yet arrived, a rupture capable of reshaping not only two nations, but the entire flow of human destiny. The turning point arrives the moment the waters of the Nile shift into blood and Egypt, stunned, faces a phenomenon no priest can interpret. Instead of hardening his heart, Pharaoh feels something unexpected, a quiet, undeniable fear that slips beneath the armor of a living god. He watches the river die, breathes the metallic scent rising from its surface, and realizes that a power greater than his throne has touched his land. In this alternate path, he yields, not out of mercy, but out of the instinctive understanding that resisting will plunge his empire into chaos. Before his bewildered advisors, he abandons the ancestral pride of the kings of Egypt and commands that Israel be released at once. A single decision, small in appearance yet immense in consequence, begins to rewrite the fate of nations. In the hours that follow Pharaoh's unexpected surrender, Egypt moves in a wave of confusion. Messengers rush through palace corridors, carrying orders no one ever imagined hearing. Hebrew families gather their belongings in silence, shocked by the sudden freedom they had prayed for yet never expected to arrive so swiftly. Soldiers, uncertain whether this release is wisdom or weakness, watch the departing crowds with a mixture of relief and dread. Along the riverbanks, the blood-stained waters settle into an eerie stillness, as if creation itself pauses to witness the break in destiny. And while Israel steps into the open desert, the air carries a fragile sense of possibility, the feeling that one altered decision has opened a path no prophecy had fully described. For the people of Israel, the sudden freedom shakes every certainty they carried. Parents cling to their children, unsure whether this release is a blessing or the beginning of another trial. Elders who spent a lifetime under Egyptian commands now walk with a mixture of awe and disbelief, feeling the weight of a liberation that arrived without warning. Even Moses is caught between gratitude and caution, sensing that the journey ahead demands strength he has not yet measured. Among the Egyptians, an uneasy silence spreads. Some feel relief at seeing the Hebrews leave, while others fear that their world has shifted in ways they cannot predict. And hovering over every heart, Hebrew and Egyptian alike, is the lingering question of what this early surrender truly means for the days to come. Across Egyptian towns, daily routines fracture as the news spreads. Markets open late, temples fall into uneasy silence, and workers whisper about a kingdom that yielded too soon. Local officials scramble to explain the Pharaoh's decision, framing it as strategic wisdom, though doubt hangs thick in the air. In Hebrew settlements, families move quickly but cautiously, helping neighbors pack while scanning the horizon for any sign of reversal. The sudden shift transforms ordinary streets into corridors of speculation, where fear and hope mingle in equal measure. Communities on both sides feel the ground subtly tilt, sensing that their familiar world has begun to slip into something uncharted. Across the wider region, the early release of Israel sends ripples through neighboring kingdoms. Traders arriving from Egypt speak of a ruler who bent at the very first sign of divine pressure, leaving foreign courts unsure whether Egypt has grown wise or weak. Some governors along the borders reinforce their garrisons, fearing that a humbled Egypt may invite rebellion or invasion. Others quietly consider alliances, sensing that the balance of power in the Nile Valley has shifted overnight. For Israel, the sudden departure alters tribal dynamics. Leaders who once guided families in secret now face the responsibility of shaping a nation in motion. And as word spreads along caravan routes, the ancient world pauses, realizing that a single decision has begun to redraw its political map. Centuries later, historians of distant empires look back on Egypt's early surrender as the moment that softened the arc of ancient conflict. Without the full sequence of plagues, Egypt avoids a legacy of devastation and remains a stable power for generations, though never again as bold or unshakable. Israel's journey, beginning earlier and with fewer scars, shapes a culture less defined by trauma and more by gradual transformation. Their laws and traditions still emerge, but with a different tone, rooted in deliverance without catastrophe. Meanwhile, surrounding civilizations reinterpret divine power, viewing this gentler exodus as evidence that mercy can redirect destiny. Over time, the world grows around this alternate history, built on a choice that reshaped the foundations of faith, empire, and memory. In this alternate timeline, faith evolves along gentler contours. Without the full cascade of plagues, the image of divine power shifts from overwhelming judgment to measured intervention. For Israel, God becomes known not through escalating wonders, but through a single decisive sign that opened a path to freedom. Worship centers on gratitude rather than survival, shaping a theology grounded in quiet trust instead of dramatic rescue. Among neighboring cultures, the tale of a restrained miracle spreads, prompting debates about a deity who acts with precision rather than force. And through the centuries, believers wrestle with a profound question. Does mercy, shown early, reveal a deeper strength than judgment withheld? As generations pass, Egypt's earlier stability fosters steady cultural growth. Without the devastation of later plagues, artisans continue their craft uninterrupted, preserving techniques that would have been lost. Trade routes remain open, allowing innovations in metalwork and agriculture to spread more quickly across the region. Israel, beginning its journey sooner, develops traditions shaped by transition rather than crisis, blending desert knowledge with memories of life along the Nile. Over time, both peoples carry forward distinct, quieter legacies shaped not by ruin, but by adaptation. Scenes unfold like fragments of a vast tapestry. The Nile, still tinted red at dawn, reflecting a sky unsure of its own calm. Hebrew families moving in slow, determined lines across the sand, their silhouettes stretching like threads pulled toward a distant promise. Egyptian soldiers lowering their spears, uncertain whether they are witnessing deliverance or the unraveling of an empire. Caravans pass along desert ridges, carrying rumors of a pharaoh who chose restraint over pride. In temple chambers, priests extinguish incense as if closing a chapter too fragile to speak aloud. And across shifting dunes, the wind carries both nations forward, brushing away the world that might have been, and revealing the fragile outline of a future rewritten In this quieter moment, the weight of what might have been settles like dust after a storm. If Pharaoh had yielded at the first plague, mercy, not resistance, would have shaped the journey ahead. It reminds us that the smallest act of surrender can redirect an entire destiny, turning suffering into a path of unexpected restoration. And within that shift lies a lesson we often overlook. Choosing compassion early can spare generations from pain. True freedom comes when stubborn pride decides to yield. As the dust settles over a story redirected by a single act of surrender, one question lingers in the silence. How many other moments in history trembled on the edge of a choice just like this? If Pharaoh's early mercy could shift the fate of nations, imagine the hidden turning point still waiting in the shadows. Stay with me, because in our next episode, we'll open another moment where destiny could have broken in a completely different direction.